Let the sheNEDigans begin. Long live the sheNEDigans.
Hello and welcome to the topic of this video. As always, let's talk some sheNEDigans. So today's video, it's kind of a fun one. I'm actually going to be talking about my top 10 personal favorite movie franchises. Now, these movie franchises, they're ranked not necessarily, I mean, they're ranked on quality to a certain degree, but also on enjoyability and emotional impact on me, you know, growing up and everything. So that's basically how this particular top 10 is going to work. There are a lot of, you know, decent, good movie franchises in here. Some you'll probably, you know, go like, what? But a lot of these franchises in here, I grew up with a lot of these movies, and even some of the movies I didn't grow up with, I did come to enjoy a lot in my older years. So that's basically what I'm ranking them on. I'm ranking them on enjoyability, quality, and how much they have emotionally impacted me throughout the years. The Terminator series. This one's very low on the list, particularly because, well, I love the franchise. Even with a lot of its faults, such as with, well, Terminator Genesis, Salvation, Rise of the Machines, and whatnot, you know, it's still an enjoyable franchise. I love a lot of the quirkiness to it, and there's a lot of other elements that I think are legitimately very good. Of course, you know, everyone talks about the first two Terminator movies, and although I agree that those ones are definitely the best, I do really enjoy the other ones to a degree. I think that they are okay quality. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're kind of just action schmuck, but they're fun action schmuck. So, action schmuck. That's basically what I think about them. I think they're fun, and the first two Terminator movies are honestly really great works of sci-fi art, and then the other ones are just like, hey, they're good action movies. The Alien and Predator franchise. Now, I'm putting these together because, although officially, I don't know what's up with this franchise. Officially, they're canon, but, you know, together, but also officially they're not canon together. It doesn't really make any sense to me. There's some people who say, oh no, it's only Alien, it's only Predator, but in reality, they are together, especially because of the AVP movies. So, you know, I consider them a franchise that is together for the most part. Now, the Alien and Predator franchises, I think, are honestly very good. Alien more so than Predator. With Predator, I think the first one's really the only legitimately really good one, and then, you know, some of the other ones, I think they have a lot of really great moments, but overall, it's the first one that's really great quality. And then with the Alien franchise, of course, you know, there's Alien and Aliens. Those are fantastic movies. And to a certain degree, I think Prometheus is a little bit underappreciated to a certain degree. I mean, it's not great, and there are some glaring problems with it, but overall, I think it's a very decent movie. And then Alien Covenant, obviously, there's a ton of problems with that one. And let's not talk about Alien Resurrection, because that's just awful. So, but overall, I think the franchise is really, you know, it's a pretty solid, good franchise. Like I said, there are a lot of glaring problems, and I do enjoy the Alien vs. Predator movies, more particularly the first one than the second one. So overall, I think it's a decent franchise, which has a lot of problems, but as a horror fan, I really like the xenomorphs, the predators, and I really like a lot of the action set pieces and the scares and everything. I think it's a very well-made horror sci-fi franchise. The DCEU. Now, I actually have a soft spot for the DCEU. I really like a lot of the movies. Some of them definitely have a lot of problems, but I was actually one of those staunch defenders of Batman vs. Superman, more particularly if you watch the extended edition. The theatrical edition had a lot of problems, but I really did enjoy, really enjoy the movie overall. I thought it was pretty good, even though, yeah, there are problems with it, and there are some problems with it. Man of Steel was another one I really enjoyed. Once again, some problems, but overall, I thought it was a pretty excellent movie. Suicide Squad I had a lot of problems with, along with Justice League. I had a lot of problems with Justice League, but that movie was just a mess overall. And then going down the line, they started getting a lot better. You know, Aquaman, Shazam, Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman was a fantastic movie. Overall, it's a decent superhero franchise. Not as good as the MCU, but quality-wise, it's not better than the MCU. But I, to a certain degree, enjoy the DCEU more than the MCU. But the thing is that it's really hard to argue the MCU has it definitely has a lot more quality to it compared to the DCEU. The XMen franchise. This is a little bit of nostalgia and quality. Personally, if I was actually going to go with quality, I would actually probably put the DCEU above the X-Men. Especially considering the X-Men movies are terrible when it comes to continuity. It's like they do all go together, but at the same time they don't. It's really weird. But I love all the movies. I think they're great. They're a lot of fun, and this is what really got me into superhero movies. When Dark Phoenix came around, I honestly was kind of sad that it was the end of the X-Men era. Until Disney finally got a hold of them, and we're going to be able to see what they're going to be able to do with them. But I loved everything to do with the X-Men. I loved its schlockiness, I loved its faults, but I also did genuinely love a lot of the incredible epic things that it brought to the superhero franchise when it first came out, along with some really great scenes, great movies, and just a lot of really good quality stuff. And hey, you can't argue with Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, so that's really great. The MCU. Of course I'm going to put this above the X-Men and the DCEU, but, overall, I would say I enjoy the DCEU more than the MCU, but that's because I'm a DC fan more than a Marvel fan. I still love both, but that's just enjoyment level and what I grew up with. But I can't argue with the amount of quality and talent that was put into the MCU. It is actually quite amazing, just, seeing how we started with Iron Man back in 2008 all the way to Endgame. And it's such an incredible emotional journey that we honestly went through. It has some incredible great actors, great action set pieces, really good stories, and some that you can honestly talk about put towards society and stuff that you should be talking about and whatnot. There's a lot of really good stuff with the MCU, and even though I'm more of a DC fan than a Marvel fan, like I said, you can't argue with what the MCU has been able to accomplish in Hollywood. The Godzilla franchise. Now, this does include practically all Godzilla movies. All the Toho Godzilla movies and the American Godzilla movies. I love the franchise and all of the movies as a whole. Now, what do I love more about Godzilla over the MCU? Because overall, technically, if you were to look at the entire franchise of Godzilla, it's a very, very weird franchise. But, going back all the way to the first one, the first movie, I would argue, some people will make fun of the fact that it's a guy in a rubber suit stomping on plastic and metal cities and whatnot, but you can't argue with the message that the very first Godzilla started, with its warning and fears of nuclear war and basically just nuclear destruction overall, as when the Japanese did make this movie, that is something that they did experience firsthand. And it was, I mean, I can understand why that message overall would be an incredibly terrifying thing. The first movie is actually considered a horror movie, and I can understand why. And then, of course, you know, as the series goes on, it gets very silly, but it does also have a lot of incredibly great epic moments, some emotional moments, and as a fan, I just can't argue with the impact that Godzilla has had on pop culture, and even just in film history in general. It's actually one of the longest, if not the longest movie franchise out there. There might be one that's longer, but I mean, Godzilla has over 30 movies. I mean, Marvel, I'm sure will catch up eventually, but so far, it still has a little bit of a ways to go. Star Wars. Of course, this was going to make it on the list, but why not as high as, well, you know, future movies, franchises I'm going to mention? Well, first off, I love Star Wars. I am a huge Star Wars nerd. There's nothing that makes me happier than being able to go to the movies and being able to experience Star Wars. And that's with movies I love and with movies that I really didn't like. I still had an incredible experience watching Star Wars in theaters. It has some incredibly great stories to tell, starting all the way back at A New Hope and what George Lucas was able to accomplish with Star Wars with special effects, the hero's journey, and just being able to apply a lot of religious and mythological aspects to this I would argue, magical sci-fi world, and how he was able to go ahead and create all of this. I would argue that Star Wars is, a lot of people say Game of Thrones is, you know, the modern Lord of the Rings or something like that, but I would argue that Star Wars is the modern Lord of the Rings to a certain degree, because it has, I mean, it's sci-fi, obviously it's very different, but there are a lot of very similar elements between Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. Like I said, there's the whole hero's journey aspect. There's also many incredible action set pieces, morals you can learn, emotional moments, and stuff like that. And yeah, the quality can be lackluster with some of the movies. You know, when you look at some of the prequels and some of the sequels as well, they definitely can have a lot of issues here and there. But overall, like, it's definitely a great, solid franchise, and one that's heavily impacted the world of filmmaking. Friday the 13th. Of course, this was going to be on the list. You're probably a little bit surprised it's not at number 1, but, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it's not at number 1. Now, I enjoy the heck out of this franchise. I absolutely love it, I adore it, and it's, you know, schlocky horror fun. And that's really the best I can say about it. Why is it above Star Wars? Well, personally, for Friday the 13th, this was really my, in a manner of speaking, awakening into the world of modern horror. I really, or at least into the slasher genre in particular, I really love Jason Voorhees and the stories that are told within his movie, even though they're kind of the same thing over and over and over again. But it's honestly kind of incredible what Friday the 13th was able to accomplish. It's very similar to Star Wars. Friday the 13th actually does have a sort of staple in the aspect of the history of cinema. One of the main things is that Friday the 13th was actually a huge influencer, not just in making, you know, more slasher movies and stuff like that, but it was also incredibly influential in the aspect of independent filmmaking in particular, and how, you know, just a guy can go ahead and pick up a camera and be like, okay, well, this thing is kind of popular, let's go ahead and try to make this on a very, very low budget. And that's what they did, and they were able to make 12 bloody movies out of that. So it's honestly incredible what Friday the 13th was able to accomplish, in my opinion. And on top of that, like I said, I love the character of Jason Voorhees, and I do have some really great emotional moments attached to Friday the 13th. Maybe not more than Star Wars, but I definitely really appreciate and love Friday the 13th for what it was able to accomplish with cinema, but also what it was able to accomplish with, well, my own personal love of horror. The Universal Monsters. Now, this one I have really a deep attachment to for a multitude of reasons. One, I did grow up on the Universal Monsters. More particularly, my first experience with them was the movie Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. So yeah, not even a scary movie. It was actually a comedy. And eventually, my love and appreciation grew as I started to watch movies like The Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula, The Mummy, The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I love all of these movies. And they do tie in to a certain degree. Well, more particularly Frankenstein, The Wolfman, and Dracula. Those are really the only ones that really do all tie in together. A lot of the other ones, you can make some, maybe some fan arguments or fan theories as to how they do all tie in together. But for the most part, it's those particular three. I love them all, and they're all really great. And one of the things I really appreciate about the Universal Monsters is its impact on the film industry. Some of the things that they were able to inspire was special effects, cinematography, overall storytelling. There's a lot of things that filmmakers have taken from the Universal Monsters, and not just for scary movies, but for a lot of different movies. The artistic integrity from the Universal Monsters was such a huge impact on how people were able to make movies, and the stories, and the monsters and stuff that they were able to create. It is really incredible just what the Universal Monsters were able to accomplish within the whole aspect of film history. The Middle-earth Saga. More particularly the Lord of the Rings over The Hobbit. I love the Hobbit movies. I mean, the Lord of the Rings is far superior in every regard, but I love both trilogies. And this one is purely on emotional and quality basis. The Lord of the Rings, I would argue, is the best trilogy that has ever been made. You might make some arguments about that, and I would like to actually hear some of those arguments, actually. But I would argue The Lord of the Rings is the best trilogy that has ever been made, and it's almost flawless. I mean, there are obviously a lot of things that were not accurate in comparison to, like, the book and the movies, but it is still such an incredible experience. One of the reasons why The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit have such an impact on my life was they really hit me hard emotionally, especially during some times when I was a kid. A lot of these movies, I was going through some like really dark times when I was younger, and these movies really hit home on being able to overcome your struggles and being able to move on with life and being able to conquer the darkness that's not just in the world but also within yourself. It is such an incredible franchise, and you can't argue with the overall quality, the action, the music, the acting. There is so much good stuff in this franchise, and I mean it shows. The Lord of the Rings is one of the greatest franchises that has won so many flipping Oscars. It is ridiculous. And for The Hobbit, it's not as good as The Lord of the Rings, but I have a lot of emotional attachment to the Hobbit movies because they were coming out when I was going to college, and the movies really reminded me of a household that I was in, the Apprentices of St. Joseph. And I kind of looked at myself as like Bilbo and the Dwarves when it came to the household that I was in. We were incredibly great friends. We made lots of great memories. We went through a lot of struggles together. When the last Hobbit movie came out, that was one of the most heartbreaking moments of my life, because when Bilbo was going home and leaving the dwarves behind in Erebor, I actually really felt that, and it was when I watched it in theaters, I was crying so hard. I had my niece and nephew with me, and they were probably like staring at me like, "Uncle Ned, we're probably gonna get thrown out of the theater. You're crying so loud." Because I really pertained that to me and my friends when we were leaving. So the Hobbit trilogy is more so based on emotional impact rather than quality. But I mean, I still think the Hobbit movies are fine. They're not garbage like some people like to try to say that they are. But Lord of the Rings is really, it's the whole saga is really an incredible experience, and it's one that I will truly never forget. of just what they were able to do, not just for film, and how they were able to make the fantasy genre a more serious thing again, but also just the emotional impact and the messages that all the movies had that pertain to my life, and that is something I will truly never forget. And that's my top 10 movie franchises. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. So let me know, what are your top 10 movie franchises that you guys like? I know there's like a ridiculous and a ton of movie franchises out there, and I would love to hear your opinions on which ones you guys love the most. So make sure to comment your list in the comment section below, and I'll make sure to take a look at them. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure that you subscribe and like the video, as well as make sure you hit the notification bell so that way you guys are kept up to date on more video releases as they come out. And make sure you follow us on social media with Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And last but not least, if you guys can support us on Patreon, I would greatly appreciate that. Any help that you can give towards the channel, even if it's just $1 a month, can go a long way. But there are some really fun tiers on the Patreon that you guys can take a look at. And yeah, so any support you can give the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. And that's basically it. You guys take care, God bless, and I will see you guys around.